Section 11, Chapters 37 through 41. In this section, Clea and I expand on how we each use social media. We also dive deep into why it's important to just be a unicorn. We also discuss getting rid of pesky distractions such as lurking, FOMO, and bored panda. We also dive very deep into self-significance and personal importance that will hinder your ability to say no or set boundaries. In this section, we also talk quite a bit about the importance of being authentic as a creative powerhouse.
Okay, so are you ready to talk about social media?
Social media.
I'm sure you're ready to talk about social media. The question is, am I ready to talk about social media? It seems like you have a really good, healthy relationship with social media, and a lot of us don't. And I'm going to include myself in that because I struggle with certain aspects of social media, and it can seem like daunting from so many angles, the whole social media question.
I actually do not feel like I have a good handle on social media. Technology is constantly changing, right? So the tactics that you would use for social media now are totally different than what they would be when there was just MySpace, or even when Facebook first started, and the way that things get marketed out there now, the fact that big companies are using social media. So that entire landscape seems to always be changing.
Absolutely, and the platforms change. I mean, I remember when Snapchat was a thing, and by the time I figured out how to use Snapchat, it was like going away, and then it was back, and now we have TikTok, and I'm like, I don't even understand how TikTok works at all.
Yeah, and unfortunately, a lot of the advice that is out there is based on that kind of social media marketing, right? The next best thing, paying for ads, things like that. So I think I wanted to write a little bit about social media because I don't consider myself a social media marketing expert, but I have figured out a way to use it in a way that's not stressful.
Yeah.
To just find a different meaning. Like when I say put your stuff out there, I think a lot of people think that when I'm talking about the internet and I'm talking about social media that you got to be consistent, you got to do this, you got to do that, you know, like all the rules that there are out there as far as like marketing yourself. And really what it comes down to is figuring out a way to do it where it is comfortable for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because whatever side of it you're on, where you're like, I don't understand the technology. Like, I feel like no one on the planet understands Pinterest, but there are people that use it. And we're all kind of like, let's agree that we don't understand this thing, but some of us use it and some of us like it. And then you have people that are afraid to post because they're afraid to say things about themselves, or there are people that are posting but feel like they're not getting traction. There are people that feel like stressed out about the whole thing in general, or are afraid of copyright infringement, or you name it. There's something that, you know, people are concerned about with social media. And the thing that I've kind of gleaned from watching how you interact with it is you're following what is comfortable for you.
Yeah.
So you're posting what you want, when you want, without much concern for it. It's almost like an online journal for yourself.
Yeah, and I figure if I find the stuff that I post interesting, right, which is why I post for myself, then chances are there are going to be like-minded people out there that might find the same stuff interesting. I like posting stuff that inspires me, that I could look back at and say like, oh man, I'm a badass, or like that was really cool, or that was a funny thing that I said. And I don't really concern myself too much with whether or not I'm getting that much of a reaction on it, because honestly, when you're measuring out those metrics, like I could either spend all my time trying to understand my metrics and like really, really going for the big bang for your buck move, or I could just keep posting because that's what I want to post. I tried doing that, all of the advice and stuff of like, you want to post this kind of content here, you want to post different content across the board. And there are certain things that like Instagram is photographs. So like you want to make your photographs look cool. Mm-hmm. You want them to look fun, but do it for yourself. I see a lot of people out there that will follow consistency, right? So then they post these, not a picture that you'd really want to share with an art collector or anything like that. Maybe like a blurry picture of a drawing sitting halfway cocked on a table where you could see the glare on it. And I see them post something like that, and I feel like they're just posting that just because they think that they need to share something versus posting something because they want to look back at it and say like, yeah, that's really awesome that I did that.
Yeah, absolutely. I swing kind of the opposite where I overthink what to share. I overthink what to say about it. I want to be more consistent, but at the same time, it becomes time consuming for me because I'm overly concerned with what I'm putting out there. Whereas with our YouTube channel and even Patreon and Discord chat, I'm just having a conversation. It's funny, like my brain has actually separated Instagram, Facebook, etc. from YouTube. Like I'm not considering YouTube social media. It's our community, so it doesn't stress me out. And then on Instagram and the like, I actually get stressed out about too much response and feel like there's this impending overwhelm of trying to interact with everyone who might have a question or a comment.
Right, exactly. And you said something really interesting there is that with YouTube and with Patreon and Discord and stuff, you're dealing with our community. Mm-hmm. And it's that disconnect. It's funny how the brain does that. The brain loves to put things in categories for you, and some categories are outside of your comfort zone or they're just way more complicated than it is. When I look at social media, whether it's Instagram or Facebook or anything like that, that's all I see is community. So basically, I'm posting something that I'm interested in, and the people that are following me could either like it or ignore it or whatever. Because I'm not posting it for them, and there is no ulterior motive behind it of like, if I post this, I'm going to sell it. Because I think that that's how a lot of people approach social media, which is extremely stressful because you will never get the results that you want if your result is to sell a piece.
Most definitely. So with social media, the thing that I'm needing to realize, and you're absolutely right about, especially for us, because there's so much crossover between YouTube and Instagram, for example, it is community. Yeah. And it's just the same as what we're doing on YouTube. As far as trying to sell stuff on social media, I have never, ever posted anything with the expectation of selling it.
Right.
Never. It's never been my motivation. My main motivation is just overcoming my own mental hurdles with it.
What is interesting about posting stuff on social media for selling, right? I've seen people that post stuff and like their whole thing is like, make sure that you take a look at this and whatever. And I don't think that that's a bad thing, unless of course you're posting stuff only because you're trying to sell it and trying to pretend like you're not. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. I've run into that a lot too. And it's like, you want to be authentic. You want to be real. Like, we're going to do a Facebook sale. And I'm going to let everybody know, like, we're doing a Facebook sale. We're going to be on Facebook. We're going to be on social media. And we're going to be trying to sell stuff because we're going to be trying our first virtual sale. And we're both nervous about it and stuff like that. But on the same token, this is just recording a moment in our life where we are trying to do something that we've never done before.
Absolutely. Ultimately, for me, our first Facebook Live sale is going to be 100% overcoming a fear of doing something that we've never done before. You likened the online world to like a giant farmer's market, which actually helped snap things into perspective a little for me, because I did the farmer's market here for almost 10 years.
Right.
Met all kinds of people, had all kinds of conversations. Sometimes at the farmer's market, people would walk right by me. Sometimes they would come in. Sometimes we would talk about my work. Sometimes we would talk about completely unrelated subject matter. And either way, through all of it, I was comfortable. Yeah. And no matter what happened, whether they bought something from me or they were just there for a visit or they just wanted to talk to me about whatever, it was a good experience. Obviously, you go to a farmer's market hoping to sell stuff, but you also go there to make connections and establish relationships with your physical community.
Well, I mean, the truth of the matter is that if you go to the farmer's market and you're just going there with the intent to sell stuff and you're having a slow day, you are going to have a very, very miserable day.
Absolutely.
Which is one of the reasons that we tell people, like, if you're going to start doing this, don't do it for the money and don't have certain expectations when it comes to things. Like, go out there and meet new people, get to know people, let people meet you, let people see your work, because these are the people that are going to find you and become your collectors. I need to make sense of the internet for myself because I was very good at doing the markets and doing farmers markets and doing art shows and things like that. But the internet still confused me. So the analogy of the farmer's market actually made sense of the internet a little bit more for me, which the result is if I'm doing this market here and I'm doing that market there and I'm putting myself out there around town in different places and different venues where people could find me, and it all leads right back to my hub, then I'm putting myself out there. I'm getting more and more chances of people finding me little by little and liking what they see. So like that helped me make sense of it because yeah, when we're in our booth, people could walk by, people could ignore us, people could come in. We're having a conversation about art. We're having a conversation about completely unrelated things, and we're still there. We're having a good time, and it's all about meeting new people and getting ourselves out there in front of a new audience and our old audience as well.
Absolutely. And whether you're talking about the farmers market or you're talking about the online social media community, you have to have another reason to be there other than making money. And you have to be having a good time. If you're not having a good time, you're not going to convey what you want to convey. And that was a huge immediate lesson with the farmers market. If I was having a bad day for whatever reason, it didn't go well.
Yeah.
And people didn't enjoy coming in.
And that's the thing, like, people could read between the lines. That's why I say, like, the worst thing you could do is come off as a desperate artist if you're feeling any sense of desperation. If you're posting something and I've seen people get upset with faceless people on the internet because they posted something and it was tumbleweeds for them, and then they get so angry and so upset and feel so rejected, even though nobody really knows what's going on, and honestly, you're not that important. Like, if they run across your stuff and they see it and they like it, they may give you a thumbs up or a heart or comment on it. But chances are they won't see it, or B, if they do see it, they might be busy living their own lives.
Absolutely. And so I think the most beautiful thing is that you said you're not trying to sell stuff. You're giving people an opportunity that they might see something they like.
Yeah.
Or they might just have a chat with you. Either way, you can't take it so seriously, I guess. And that's why, as of late, I've just decided I'm going to post nerdy stuff that I'm excited about. I mean, if I'm excited about it, I'll share it. If I'm not excited about it, I'm not going to feel the need to share it just because that's what I am supposed to do.
Right.
Just not take it so seriously.
Exactly.
And on that note, the next section you have in the book is called Why So Serious? Be a Unicorn.
Yep. I think everybody should be a unicorn.
I think so too. You talk about taking yourself too seriously as an artist, and I could personally say that taking myself too seriously as an artist is one of the worst business mistakes I've ever made, and I'm only recently starting to recover from that decision that I made, because there are so many implications there when it comes to what it means to be a professional artist, what it means for time management, what it means for the amount of time you allow yourself to have fun, what it means for the way you go about doing things and the way that you communicate. And basically what happened within myself was that I stopped having fun. I started imposing all these stressful deadlines on myself. I was overly concerned with how I was being perceived as a professional, not even an artist, as a professional. And it just led to me really not having that good of a time in my art career.
Not having a good time and making some really shit decisions because you are making a lot of decisions that are based on what the perception of other people are going to be, what it means to be a professional artist, and not necessarily what is it that I want out of this.
Absolutely. And did it make me a better artist or a better business professional? No.
No.
It did the opposite. It basically just infused stress into everything that I did. I'm not saying that my world fell apart or that my relationships fell apart or that any of that, but basically I was not in a good place
Yeah.
for a while there.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's easy. It's really, really easy to go into that place, especially for artists. There are a lot of things that we want to look out for when you're deciding to do this crazy thing of becoming an artist, right? And one of the main things is the fact that, you want to be taken seriously. So there's a lot of insecurity that is wrapped up in that and the way that you approach your career. So the moment that you start selling some art and the moment that people start to get to know you and you start to build a collector base, it's very, very easy to fall into that trap of wanting to be a professional. I take my career seriously. And a lot of times, I know for me personally, like, one of the main reasons that my mindset went into that direction was because of the fact that, like, nobody took me seriously when I said that I wanted to become an artist. Nobody took me seriously when I said I wanted to grow up to be an artist. They were like, you're going to starve, you're going to this. And whenever I talked about becoming an artist or doing anything creative with my life, the people around me weren't as supportive because they were more afraid for me than anything else. Mm-hmm. And so, like, I think that the moment that I was able to make some money from this and it started to look like it was becoming a career, I started to slip into that place and not even realize that it was a place of insecurity where I was like, well, yeah, this is what I do for a living. This is, I am an artist, like blah, 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 blah. And making sure that everybody knew that I was an award-winning artist and making sure that everybody that I interacted with in the art world knew that I sold a whole bunch of works and a whole bunch of things. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the decisions that I made revolved around that life. It's like that became a gilded cage for me.
Yeah, because one of the things that happened to both of us as a direct result of taking ourselves too seriously is that we put aside things that we enjoyed. We talked ourselves out of following harebrained ideas because they didn't directly pertain to the business side of what we were doing. We stopped experimenting with things as much as we did in the beginning. Basically, it became like a well-oiled machine, which is good, but that's not the entirety of it.
No, because all the innovation and the experimentation that got me to where I was, I put a pause on that and just went with what I know works. As an artist, this is what we do. I think it's one of the reasons that the YouTube channel is the answers are not so definite, because I do understand that not only is everybody's journey going to be different, you're going to blaze your own trail, but even within that journey, things are going to change. You're going to evolve. You're going to want to grow. You're going to want to move and start doing new things, doing things that you never even expected that you were going to do, mm-hmm. because you allow yourself to go with the flow versus falling into a standard of like, well, now I'm a professional artist, so now things have to be done like this.
Right, which is a recipe for the plateau to happen.
Yep.
And one of the things that I'm realizing really recently, actually, as we're doing this commentary, is like, this is something to look at, because if you are taking yourself too seriously and you've removed the fun out of the equation, it's easy to plateau. And like for us, now we're infusing the fun and the not seriousness back into it. And there's some pushback. There can be some pushback from other people.
Oh, yeah.
So if you're not solid in this area, it's easy to hear like, wait, you're doing what? I thought you were doing this, this, and this. What do you mean you're doing this, this, and this? I thought you had a successful business. And if you don't have your footing under you, it's easy to question that and feel like, oh, maybe I'm making bad choices and having fun.
Yeah, and that is one of the things that falling into that place of calling yourself a professional could really hurt you, is that you spend a lot of time really concerned about other people's opinions of you, because if you need to declare yourself a professional artist or a professional anything for that matter to someone else, to be honest with you, it's because you're more worried about what their opinion is about what you're doing, and it's almost like you're seeking approval all the time. Mm-hmm. Whereas I've gotten to a point where I like to call myself a forever amateur. You know, like I will always be an amateur because I'm always moving on to the next step and the next step and the next step. And
Always
sure,
doing something new.
the stuff that I've done, I know it, but I'm not going to stay there simply because I know how to do it that way. I'm always going to be leveling up.
Yeah. And you talk about how kids, you kind of feel like kids have it all figured out.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought, kids really do have some things figured out. And of course, I like being a big kid, if you will, with the freedoms that come with being an adult. Right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And the life experience and wisdom, but also the childlike mentality. And I took a few notes here. The ones that are most relevant to me are kids don't talk themselves out of harebrained ideas. They go for it.
Yeah.
They're not like, oh, I would really like to draw this picture or build this thing, but I don't have time and it's not going to work anyway, so I might as well just not.
I don't have time and I don't have the skills. I need to learn how to draw noses or whatever. And like, they just go for it.
Absolutely. They also don't often feel rushed or stressed unless they're being rushed or stressed by some outside influence.
Yeah, usually an adult.
They fa-chunk and shift gears like a pro. If you watch a kid throughout the day, a kid is an expert fa-chunker.
Yep.
A kid might work on one thing for half an hour, do another thing for an hour, do something for 5 minutes, take a nap, eat a meal or not eat a meal, take another nap, work on this thing. They multitask like pros.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the techniques that I use now, I actually learned from watching my 4-year-old.
Absolutely. And they laugh and they have fun and they don't take things seriously.
Yeah.
Someone recently said that they found that sometimes they would get backlash for finding the humor in things and the lighthearted nature, but that's how they choose to look at life. And I said, I completely agree. If I couldn't find the humor and the fun in things, my alternative would be to be in crisis mode.
Oh, yeah.
And stressed out.
Yeah. And there are some people out there that are so used to being in crisis mode and stressed out that whenever they see someone who is smiling or looking on the bright side, to them, because they don't think that life works that way, they experience it as a falsehood. Mm-hmm. Right? Because like, what do you mean you're not stressed out? What do you mean you're not worried about that thing?
Like you're wearing rose-colored glasses.
Yeah.
I remember I had one of my peers back in the day had said, like, what, you think you could just live your life wearing rose-colored glasses? I went directly out and bought a pair of rose-colored glasses after this conversation. And my response was, the view looks pretty good from here. And I'm not talking about a happy face sticker on a volcano.
Right.
I'm not talking about toxic positivity. We recently had a conversation about toxic positivity and the need to underplay negative situations and overvalue a positive attitude. And it's not what we're talking about here.
Right.
Not at all. It's not that you're not aware of things or you're not facing things. It's just how you're choosing to respond day to day.
Yeah, exactly. Like, shit happens and you look at the shit and you decide how you're going to respond to it. You don't ignore it. You don't just put a happy face sticker on it. You respond to it and then you move forward. If you decide to move forward in a positive way, that's even better.
And sometimes you're like, well, this sucks. This really sucks. But you know what? I'm not going to stay here in the suck.
Right.
Today, I came up against my serious business person, Stickman, because we have a lot going on. Always, but especially right now, there are like a million things going on.
Right.
And if I can't find the fun day to day, then my alternative right now is to just be uber stressed out about time and deadlines. So I was putting myself in a positive place this morning, and the Stickman chimed in like the voice of the Lord Almighty and said, you're going to have to answer for all of your failures because you're not being responsible. Because I chose to allocate some time for a side harebrained project that I have going when there's a million things going on.
Right.
And I was like, interesting. I'm going to have to answer for my failures. My failures are these perceived abstract notions that there might be failures in the foreseeable future.
Well, I thought it was interesting because when you said it to me, like my stickman said this, I was like, what failures?
I'm actually not facing any failures. I'm
Yeah.
actually chunking and managing things pretty well. But it was like, you can't keep this up. You're going to fail and let people down. And then you're going to have to explain yourself and face your failures and answer for them. So my response immediately, because I've been working at this, was, Stickman, I don't work for you. Maybe I forgot that for a while and worked for you, but I don't work for you anymore because you're actually a really horrible boss to work for.
Exactly. Stickman is a shit boss to work for.
Most
they
definitely.
are a terrible boss. I think if there's anybody that's listening to this and they have the stickman telling them what to do, then they need to fire their stickman.
Absolutely. Work for yourself, not for your negative talk, stickman.
Yeah.
So this section is about getting rid of pesky distractions. And distractions come in all forms, shapes, sizes, time durations, you name it.
Yep.
They are out there everywhere, whether it's things that you're doing or things that other people are expecting. Social media.
Yeah, I think the reason that this popped into my brain was after the social media thing was because I really, really, especially writing the book, realized that like, oh, I need to shut off all my notifications because, whether or not you're involved with a painting or working on a creative project, writing a book, writing a song, if your phone's like, bam, you're going to look at it.
It's really easy to look at it. And it's really easy to look at it and then get sidetracked looking at other things. I have my phone on silent almost 100% of the time with most notifications turned off. And I look at it periodically throughout the day and I get back to people. But otherwise, it's too easy to go down a rabbit hole. Today, my phone was like, your Amazon reviews have been seen 1,000 times. And I'm like, 1,000 people looked at my reviews. And I was like, oh, let me see. And I was like, what am I going to check?
Yeah.
And what's the point of I left some positive reviews on some stuff I liked. End of story.
What really sucks about it, too, is that a lot of times that's a pattern interrupt. Right. So like you're in the throes of creating something. For me, it was when I was writing the book and I was in the middle of a paragraph and all of a sudden my phone's like, bam. And then I glance over at my phone and then I go back to the paragraph and I'm like, crap, where was I? And so, yeah, I got to the point where I was just leaving the phone in the other room. Even though I already had turned off all the notifications, I just did not want the phone in my vicinity. I figured even if there was an emergency, I could check my phone later.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, there's another element to this because there's always distractions, whether it's your phone, your computer, another human.
Yeah.
So I feel like the underlying culprits that make us susceptible to distraction are really the gremlins here.
Yeah.
And I have noticed that if I'm feeling a little bit directionless or lost, or I'm feeling social pressures like that I need to keep up with certain things, or I'm feeling like FOMO, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
Or I'm feeling like, a people pleaser, like, oh, but this person really needs to talk to me right now.
Yeah.
All of those things are the things that lead you to the behaviors that take you down the rabbit hole of distraction. I can't tell you how many days that I felt a little directionless because maybe I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do or I was feeling overwhelmed. And the next thing you know, an hour's gone by and I've been reading a Bored Panda article.
Yeah.
And nothing's wrong with Bored Panda. I enjoy the lightheartedness.
Yeah, Bored Panda is great, but Bored Panda is not great when you're in the middle of something that you really want to work on, but you're too afraid to work on it, so you're going to use every opportunity and every excuse in the world to avoid it.
Right. I've caught myself like, Clee, how many times do you need to refresh your email inbox? Like, move on to something else, please and thank you. The FOMO aspect of it is like for example, with our Patreon family and Discord, sometimes I do get FOMO when I feel like, oh, I'm missing all these things that they're doing and saying and sharing on Discord, and the feeling of like, I need to spend like the next several hours catching up with things and understanding that those things are going to be there.
Yeah.
They're archived. So I do love to check in, but sometimes I'm like lurking on social media when I don't need to be.
It's the same thing with emails and stuff like that. Like you gotta get out of lurk mode and just give yourself a time where you're willing to check it. Whether it's like before you get started on something or after you get started on something or maybe in the middle of the afternoon or whatever it is, I think it's important to give yourself that time to be able to check it, but have it out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah, and be able to catch yourself, like getting more practiced at catching yourself doing one of those time-sucking things and be like, oh, okay,
All right,
time to move on.
time to move on. Yeah.
So another distraction for a lot of creatives can just be people.
Yeah.
Like, for example, when you were writing the book, and we live together, but writing a book is a very solitary process. And even though I was here with you, oftentimes I was a distraction for you.
Oh yeah.
Because I had a question or had something pop into my head that I was like, I want to talk about this right now.
And like I said, it's interesting because when you are writing a book, you are really, really on a stream of some kind of consciousness, like a stream of thought. And for me personally, when I'm writing it, I'm just trying to capture what's going on in my mind, and then I'm going to go back and edit that, right? So it was like, I've got this thought, I'm following this thought down the rabbit hole. I want to make sure that I write this down, that I get it right. And you're thinking about the words and what words are going to be able to describe what you're thinking about. And then all of a sudden somebody's like, hey, did you know that blah, 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 blah? And you're like, what? And you get pulled. It's almost like you're in one world and then you get ripped out of that world into a different world.
Absolutely. You're flowing, you're in the flow, and then you get yanked out of the flow, and some of that stuff gets lost.
Yeah.
So like you had to set a different level of boundaries with me when it came to writing the book, and I needed to and did understand those boundaries of like, this is a little different process than our day-to-day studio time. But for anybody, I think the next section that you go into with self-significance and the ability to say no specifically kind of deals with people.
Yeah.
Whether they live with you or they're close family or friends or their acquaintances or their colleagues and business partners, and understanding the need to set boundaries because of what you're doing.
This was a really difficult chapter for me to write, but it was something that I knew needed to be in the book because it's really hard to tell someone that, like, listen, you're basically having a hard time saying no to other people because your personal importance is all wrapped up in saying yes to that person.
Absolutely. This is a particularly challenging struggle for me, and I've worn the badge of people pleaser and self-validation when it comes to other people, and finding it just at times in my life just impossible to say no, just impossible to set boundaries because they need me, and also I don't want to let anyone down ever. But before you know it, you never have time for the things that are you. You don't even know what those things are, and you're just kind of like lost in everyone else's current.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I will get a lot of angry people that will tell me like, well, it's different when you have kids. And I think a lot of these people don't understand that I have kids. I've experienced this. I know what it's like to feel like you're being dragged in, that you don't have a moment to yourself. But as a parent, and especially if you're a parent and you're an artist, it is making sure that like, okay, I'm going to give myself this time. And if you're with somebody or you have someone else that is there and you're able to say like, this time between this time and this time, these 2 hours are my 2 hours to be in the studio. And the only way that that will happen is if you set those boundaries and you make that important. What happens with parents, and I know because I experienced this, was that then all of a sudden it's like, well, I need to take care of the kids, right? Because I know how to do it. I know how to do this. I know how to do that. And a lot of my personal importance was really wrapped up in being a father.
Sure, and you're also talking about micromanaging, lack of trust, lack of willingness to delegate responsibility to other people.
It was the realization that if I died, the world would go on. Everybody they'd figure it out. They'd be fine.
Yeah.
And that was an eye-opening thought for me, because up until then I was under the impression that people needed me. And so like a lot of the things that I did, including for my kids, I did because I thought that they needed me. And something interesting happens when you do that, right? Because instead of saying like, okay, it's not that they need me, I'm doing this because this is what I want to do, not because I have to. Without understanding that, what ended up happening a lot of times was resentment set in. And I know that a lot of parents will have a hard time being able to admit that, like, there are times where you kind of feel resentful to your kids because maybe you want that creation time, or you want to take some time off, or just anything. You want to go relax under the stars, or whatever it is that you want to do. And it's easy to let that resentment set in unless you realize that, no, you are not this person's slave. You are doing these things because this is what you want to do, and you're willing to give yourself time to do other things that you want to do as well.
To find the balance, not just for parents with kids, but we've talked with a lot of artists who are caregivers.
Yeah.
Caring for their parents or family members or even friends, and being able to be in a place where you have boundaries so that you don't feel resentment, so that you're coming from a place of love, so that everyone's needs are met.
Yeah, and the thing is that for a lot of us, like, we think that our situations are unique, but it's funny because even if it's someone who doesn't have kids or is not taking care of somebody, then at that point, if they're used to going out with their friends every weekend and they want to not do this thing that socially they've done all the time, then they're going to face pushback there, and they're going to face their own guilt, and people will tell them, well, it's not the same if you're not there, and then that's where personal importance sets in again.
I think two really important things that I've realized with this is that someone or something is always going to need my attention, always, like every moment of the day. So learning this and setting those boundaries is important, and that my value is intrinsic. It's inherently mine.
Right.
My self-worth isn't tied into how good a friend I am, how good a daughter I am, or anything of that nature. I care for the people in my life. How good a partner I am to you.
Exactly.
And you're real easy to coexist with, but if I get all lost in my head, it's easy to feel stressed out by any little thing.
What's interesting about that is that personal importance usually goes hand in hand with something that is outside of you, right? So it's your job, it's your kids, it's this person needs me, that person needs me. And what ends up happening is that the moment that that person is not in the picture anymore, you get empty nesters whose kids leave and they go to college and they don't even know what to do with themselves because their entire value has been wrapped up in being a caregiver to these kids. Mm-hmm. And they don't have their own thing. And like, that's the thing. Anything that you think gives you importance, whether it be a person or an object or whatever it is that is outside of you, it's a false sense of self. It's not real. Like, you got to find out who you are and share that with the world, not judge yourself based on how relevant you are to the other people that are around you.
Absolutely. So when it comes to the people in your life and people as a distraction, your family, your friends, your colleagues, whoever you associate with, if you've set things up one way where you're kind of always at beck and call, and then you make this transition, it's going to take time. That's something I've realized. If you set a dynamic up a certain way and then you go changing it on people, they often don't like it.
No, they don't like it because this is how it's been. You've changed, man. I can't believe that, blah, 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 blah. Wait, but I always come here for this. A lot of people, there's going to be a lot of pushback because you basically have trained those people to get whatever it is that you feel that gives you value. Mm-hmm. So at that moment where you're like, well, I need to spend time with my art. I want to do this thing. I want to take an hour where I'm not doing anything today. Whatever it is, you got to remember that there's another person a lot of times in that equation that you've trained to respond a certain way to what you do. So the moment you take that away, there is definitely going to be pushback, not only from them, but then you're going to feel guilty because you're not doing this thing that well, this is what I've always done. I've heard so many people say that they're not happy with something that they have to do for someone else. And I'm like, well, why do you do it then? And they're like, well, this is just, I've always done this. And like, I can't stop now. And my question is like, of course you can. What do you mean you can't stop now? It's quite possibly, depending on what situation it is that you've put yourself in, it could be extremely difficult and take quite some time for it to change.
I've had experiences with family where it's conversations, multiple conversations that take place over many, many years to shift a dynamic into a healthier place.
Right.
And part of it is like, stop making excuses. I was notorious for coming up with great excuses for why I couldn't fulfill a need for somebody.
Right.
Lies. Instead of just simply saying no.
Right.
I don't want to.
Right.
And in recent years, I've tried to get more comfortable with just simply saying no.
One of the most common things out there is the fact that people lie. A lot. Like a lot. So, and somebody might be listening to this and be like, I never lie. Well, that's a lie. Because there are so many countless times that we call these things little white lies, but we don't realize how much they take our power away. So, for example, a point in fact, instead of saying like, no, I don't want to go to your house to do this, a lot of people will make up an excuse.
Sure, I'm not feeling well. I have this going on. I have that going on.
Yep.
And ultimately, when you start to shift the dynamic, it's going to take people some time maybe. And then ultimately, I think sometimes we discover that there are people in our life that may not be good for us.
Yeah.
Maybe they're toxic. Maybe the dynamic isn't going to shift and we need to just separate.
There are a lot of people that might be toxic in your life that you didn't even realize that they were toxic because of the dynamic, because of the personal importance that
because
you've put in there.
Then you then form codependency. You play this role, they play this role,
Yeah.
and you both get something out of it. You get personal importance, they get your attention, whatever the dynamic is.
What is most important here, because I'm sure that a lot of people will be like, well, what does this have to do with art, right? Is looking at a deeper level of all the excuses that you've made to say that you don't have enough time to do your art, or that you don't have enough this to do your art, or you don't have enough that to do your art. Basically, it comes down to, if you don't have time for something, then you really need to look at your personal importance relationships, because chances are there is a pattern that you're playing out that just is not, it's not allowing you to live your life and to do you, to be you.
To do you and be you, which leads perfectly into the next section, which is being authentic is your bag of creativity. And all this to say, basically, all of this previous section is, I often find that if I'm feeling drained or exhausted or stressed out or pulled in different directions, there's a pretty solid chance that I'm not being my authentic self in some way, shape, or form.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And I think in all cases, however you want to label it, fear of being your authentic self is really fear of not being socially acceptable in one way, shape, or form or another.
Exactly. Because there are so many concepts out there that differ and contradict one another about what is socially acceptable. And a lot of times people feel torn in different directions. And that is one of the main measures here of authenticity, is like, you are either being you and being your glorious, weird self and putting yourself out there in the world and being able to admit when, hey, I don't know this thing, or this is what I think, or that's what I think. And being unapologetic about being you.
Yeah, I had written down unapologetic honesty about who we are.
Yeah.
And so, one of the values that was instilled in me really early on from my grandmother, who I loved and had all the admiration for, but her thing, because she was very concerned about impressions and so on and so forth, was always be a sweet, good, agreeable, kind girl, and everyone will like you, you know.
Right.
I'm paraphrasing here, but
Yeah.
basically what she meant was act in a way that puts others' needs first, make sure everyone's comfortable, don't do anything to shake things up, and you won't have to worry about making enemies
Right.
or being criticized or being judged. And so that was kind of a foundational thing for my people-pleasing mentality that I carried through most of my life.
Right.
And then it kind of lended itself to this sense of like what it meant to be on and in social situations, which I try, which I'm the kind of person who I can't really play a role or hide who I am. I kind of wear who I am on my sleeve anyway, and I'm quirky and weird and dorky and goofy. But at the same time, it was like feeling this need to like level up in social situations.
Right.
Make sure everyone's needs are met, make sure everyone's happy, make sure I'm doing the most for everyone, kind of disregarding how I might feel in a given situation. And that can be really exhausting. And I realized like the reason that all these things seem so exhausting is because my brain is in overdrive
Trying to figure out what to do, how to act.
for all these different people and scenarios and circumstances. It's
Yeah.
a lot to manage.
The thing about authenticity that I've realized, because a lot of people will assume that like, well, somebody spoke their mind, they're just being real. I'm just being real with you. And, you know, you see that person be real and they're kind of being an asshole, right? Mm-hmm. And what's interesting about being authentic, being truly, truly authentic, is that most of your sights are set on what's going on internally.
With
right?
you.
Yeah, with you. You're not pointing a finger at someone else. You're not blaming someone else. You're not judging someone else. You don't have expectations for anyone else. You're basically just looking at the world with an unconditioned filter. Because if you're able to look inside of yourself and be who you are unapologetically, that means that because not everybody's going to like you, right?
Right.
Not everyone's going to like you, and it's not your job to make sure that you comply with what everyone wants, because then people will like you, because then what'll happen there is you're being pulled in 50 to 100 to 1,000 to 1,000,000,000 different directions, and you don't even know how to act most of the time. And that's where a lot of people, like, you have people out there that are not paying attention to that, because that's just the way that we've all been trained to behave, is, you know, make sure that people like you. But when you look at the way that you behave maybe around your parents versus how you behave with this group of friends versus how you behave with that group of friends versus how you might behave with the people at work, what you'll realize is that you put on these different roles for different people. And the challenge here of really, really finding your own authenticity is you should be the same no matter which group you're with.
You should be you.
You should be you.
Because, and often I found that, like, playing a role that you feel is suitable for this person or that person, people don't like that anyway.
Yeah.
They don't like the people pleaser MO. They don't like the yes man.
Yeah, and again, you can read between the lines. Whenever you run into somebody that is being a yes man, or run into somebody that is just telling you what you want to hear, that's infuriating.
It feels false.
It does.
I know people that are like superhuman in their ability to help others, to be there, to get stuff done. And I know some that are coming from a people-pleasing place, and I know some that are coming from an authentic place, and it feels so much more genuine and authentic
Right.
and real when it's coming from that real place of like they want to be doing those things. It's part of who they are. They're not doing it to try to impress others. It's just how they're doing things. And then you see the other people stressing out and feeling obligated and feeling put upon, and it's like it's coming from two very different places.
Well, I mean, and that's something that I've experienced in my life. With one parent, I had where you called it putting on airs. Like
Yeah.
you wanted to make sure that everything was perfect and that everything was this. And nothing ever turned out the right way. So like to people's faces, there was a smile and oh yeah, this is okay. But then behind closed doors, there was the complaining. It's like, did you see so and so and blah blah. And that's what I mean. Like if you're trying to follow standards that are set by other people, then you are going to get extremely judgmental of yourself and you will be judgmental of other people. If you are following expectations of what other people expect you to be, then that means that you have expectations for other people and they're going to let you down. And that's what I mean. When you are truly authentic, where you are looking within yourself and you are just who you are, then you give other people license to just be who they are.
And everyone's more comfortable and the better for it.
Exactly.
And I think that's the main reason that authenticity is such a critical thing in what we do, not only in the studio, but what we do on YouTube, what we do on Patreon, is because it's not long-term sustainable to be anything else.
No, not at all.
It really isn't, and it doesn't make for true relationships or true exchanges if you're not being your authentic self.
Yeah.
So people will say, gosh, Rafi and Klee, you come off as so authentic. And that's because we are willing and allowing people, anyone who sees our channel, to see all of it.
Yeah. To see all of it.
To see us say, we don't know, or we bumbled through this, our stuff is unscripted, we're just talking and figuring stuff out. Because anything else would be exhausting and unsustainable.
Yeah, I mean, if I was approaching the YouTube channel or the book or anything and trying to approach it from a place of like, look at me, I know everything. I know everything, and this is important that you understand that I know everything. And then I was just researching things so that I would make sure that I was correct in what it was that I was stating. The videos, it would be stressful. It would all be stressful because I'd be trying to be someone else instead of just being me and just talking based on my experience. That's the only thing that I could really know. It doesn't matter if I research something and read about it. Like, that's not going to teach me the valuable experience of doing that thing. Just doing that thing is what's going to teach me a valuable experience. And it doesn't make me an expert. It just makes me a guy that experienced that thing.
Absolutely. Which is one of the things that makes the live streaming so much fun. And live streaming would be impossible without a level of comfort and authenticity on all sides.
Oh, yeah.
Because the live stream, they happen at a rapid pace. We're getting questions and comments and sharing stories. And if it couldn't just flow like a conversation.
And that is the thing. Like, authenticity is being able to just have a conversation and not being afraid that you're going to say the wrong things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because like you just get to talk, you get to be you. And you don't have to worry about whether or not you're impressing somebody, trying to sound smarter than I am, or more intelligent than I am, or better equipped than I am. It's like you're putting on a facade because you want people to take you seriously or like you.
Or you're afraid to speak at all because you want to be socially acceptable and you're not sure that you are, whatever socially acceptable means.
Exactly. And like, I think we would all benefit if everyone was just out there and being real. That's one of the reasons that when we put ourselves out there, it's not glamour shots. You know, it's not. A lot of times our videos, I'd look like I've been in the studio for days and haven't showered for like 3 of them. And that's because that's what you get. I'm not going to get all pretty for the camera if I have something to talk about or somebody asked a question. My thing is just having a genuine conversation. And so I think I've gotten very, very comfortable with being me, but even still, there are times where I run into certain social interactions where hindsight, usually. I'll be like, oh, that's interesting. I think I was trying to impress this person.
Yeah, like maybe what did I exactly say
Yeah,
that?
exactly. So it's something that we are constantly looking at, constantly questioning, because it's easy to fall into that trap of wanting to seem like more than you are, which is hilarious to me because you are more than you think you are most of the time.
Absolutely. Or even less than you are. I had a friend back in the day who was wicked smart, and she put on airs that she was ditzy because she thought it was more socially acceptable for someone who looked the way that she looked, which was gorgeous, to come across as a ditzy girl.
Right.
And I remember having that conversation with her, like, what are you doing? Like, you're one of the smartest people I know.
Yeah.
And being, just whatever we think socially acceptable is. Do I think that 100% authenticity at all times forevermore for the rest of your life without stumbling is possible? Probably not. We're humans. We're going to catch ourselves doing weird stuff.
Yeah, but and trying to be as real as you can in every moment that you can, and catching yourself when you're not, even if it's hindsight, even if it's like 3 days later and you're thinking about something. Listen, if you have a conversation with someone and you walk away from that conversation and 3 days later you're ruminating about something when it comes to that conversation, chances are you were inauthentic during that conversation. Every experience that I've had where I did not put on any airs and I was just having a conversation with someone and I said what I meant and spoke what I thought, at the end of those conversations, there was nothing left hanging.
I agree with you to an extent, but I will also add this. For reformed or reforming people pleasers or people who are maybe making a shift towards more authenticity, I can speak from experience and say there have been times where I have been completely authentic and I walk away from the conversation and I still ruminate because the worry sets in that maybe I was too assertive, that maybe I spoke too much truth, and maybe that offended the other person.
Right.
So it's getting over that hurdle also of being comfortable speaking your truth and speaking your mind and not worrying so much about how it's received.
Right. That is a good point because if you are used to running the habit of having a conversation with someone, which usually happens, especially when you're a people pleaser, is you have a conversation with someone and you've gotten into the habit that the next day or the day after you think about that conversation and you wonder if you said something wrong or did something wrong. And basically that's your habit. Then no matter what, even if you go and you're authentic, you're still going to play that habit after the fact.
I call it having a vulnerability hangover,
Right.
Which allows me to not take it so seriously. But whenever I'm, like in a situation where I might slip into people pleasing and I don't, I consider that vulnerable because it is revealing my 100% authentic self. And sometimes the next day I feel emotional repercussions of the discomfort
Right.
of that as I make that transition. It doesn't happen to me very often anymore, but sometimes like when it comes to perceived authority figures
Oh, yeah.
and things of that nature, I sometimes do slip into that where I think I need to do and say, be a certain way to not ruffle any feathers. And so it is, over time, little by little.
Little by little. And honestly, I want to make sure that this part of the book is not taken all that seriously. It's not like, be authentic or else your life is over. Yeah. This is something that really, it's just something that to become aware of and to take a look and see if you are giving yourself more stress and more limitations because you're, you might be playing a role. And it doesn't mean that if you're being inauthentic, it means you're a big fat liar. It just means that you're used to playing a certain role when you're around someone or around a personality, a certain type of personality. You might play a certain role. A lot of times we're not even aware of these things. And I think really being authentic is allowing yourself to be aware of the moments where maybe you're not being you.
Yeah.
Maybe you withheld saying something and you came up with a brilliant excuse on why. Well, I didn't say this because I'm the better person or whatever it is.
Or maybe you said something you didn't mean because you thought it's what the other person needed to hear.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Having fun with this kind of thing and not taking it seriously is really, really important, because it comes down to just allowing yourself to see yourself as the really cool, freaking weird person that you are, and putting that self out there and identifying the times where maybe you're not playing that person. Maybe you're playing a different role. It's like you're a character in a movie, and sometimes you pretend to be a different character than what you actually are, because that's what's been expected of you. That's how it's always been, or whatever reason there is. And it's just fun to really identify these things and be like, wait a second, that's so weird.
Yeah.
Because it is weird. When you start to notice it, you'll realize, well, that's so weird. I act like a child when I'm around my mom. There are those things that are going to pop up. And so that's why I say, like, just have fun with this.
So it's a daily practice in embracing your glorious, unique, awkward, nerdy, fabulous, dorky, wonderful self.
Yeah, exactly. Just be a unicorn.
Totally.
Be a unicorn, because that's what you are.
And you don't have to be a unicorn dressed like a human. You could just be a unicorn.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so on to the next chapter.
Yeah.
And that concludes this section of the audiobook. Thank you so much for listening, you guys. If you would like, you can proceed to the next section. Have an awesome day. Adios.